Is that recording? Can everyone see that? Hopefully. Yes, it says let people know they're being recorded. Brilliant. Okay, so what we're going to do is edit out anyone's video or for the FAQ, and we'll just record and publish those in more of an FAQ somewhere on our website or a forum or something like that in the future. And then we'll use the recording for people who couldn't make these sort of clinics, and we'll put it on our website so you can download it and record it, view it. So if you have your colleagues who couldn't make it, please check, ask them to check the website in the next week or so. Okay, so we'll move on from that. Let me just. Okay, so what I would like to say is if we do have some open questions, this is not Chatham House rules. We do have the Competition Markets Authority, so we can't talk about fixing prices and stuff like that. I think probably everyone's aware about that, but please keep it civil between industry and discuss what we're discussing about now. That'd be great. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an introduction to the industry process from my colleague, Tom Merritt, who is our business analyst, who's just joined us, learning lots too, but getting through the process. He's on our screen as we speak. And then we're going to have a very small introduction to the developer documentation by me. For people who don't really understand what the developer documentation is, i.e. an API specification, I'm just going to give a rough idea. Apologies to people who do know about it, but it's really, I'm trying to get everybody to understand what they've got to be doing and some of the tools that we can help with that may be available in the future if you are not a software developer or you don't have a software team or you want to use some tools. So we'll talk about that as well. Andrew Glover's going to give us a representative for the small CPs, and then we're going to have Andrew talking about ISPA UK, David Burns talking about UK WISPA, and then Mike will give us some discussions around INCA. So these are industry associations, and if you're not part of these associations and they're relevant to you, please do talk to the representatives afterwards. Send them an email. I'm sure they'll give you their details. And then after this, we'll have an open Q&A session for about 40 minutes. And as I said, if you do have some questions and you want to start posing them now, please put them in the chat. Lou, lovely Lou, will start to collate them, and then we'll go through them and we'll answer as many as we can. And if we can't answer them, we will find a way to answer them. So brilliant. So I'm going to move on. So this is Tom. Tom, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. And yeah, good morning, everyone. As Richard said, my name's Tom Merritt. I'm a BA here at TOTSCo. I've very recently joined, so the process is new to me, and we're all playing catch up on it. But I'd like to give you an introduction today, a brief overview of the industry process, sort of what it is and why it will matter to your companies. So the document itself is an 80-page working document. It's been written and compiled by a design group comprised of experts within industry. We really would recommend reading the document in its entirety if you haven't already. So I'll give an overview of it today, but it is a long, detailed document, and we really would reiterate that reading it in its entirety would be the best thing to do. As TOTSCo, we are the custodians of the document, but it's important to remember the process itself is owned by industry and has been written by industry. So we, as TOTSCo, are sort of almost like a sort of touch point for questions you may have, but we're not the owners of the process. That's been put together by, as I say, experts from the industry, really good and knowledgeable people. So the purpose of the industry process itself is to document the one-touch switch process, the OTS process, and I think we have a very simple sort of diagram of the one-touch switch process here in the slide. It's a simple matter of a customer approaching a new provider, requesting their services and providing their details, so their sort of personal details and the details of their existing provider and the services they have with the existing provider. The idea of the one-touch switch process is then that they would automatically receive the important switching information from their existing provider, so things like early termination charges, and at the same time receive the new contract details from their gaining provider to consent to the switch. and that the switch date will be agreed. And on this date, the old services will end and the new services will begin with no further action from the customer. And the idea, the customer won't need to approach their existing provider at any point in the process. So it's important to remember that this one-touch switch process will apply to all CPs, all communications providers, regardless of their size. I know on the call today we have some of the smaller entities, potentially some what we might call micro CPs as well, who maybe serve rural communities, remote communities where they might not have many customers either moving to them or moving from them, but the OTS process will apply to all providers. I think there's a question I think in the chat. We'll cover this later on about where the document is stored. It is available on the TOTSCo website, so it is available for download on there. I should have mentioned that earlier. And if we move on to the final point on this slide, at the moment, the one-touch switch process applies only to the residential switching process of phone or broadband services. So I guess potentially this is open to change, but at the moment it is only residential phone, or I should say phone and or broadband services rather than phone or broadband services, because the scenario someone might move both at the same time. So that's everything on the first slide. So if we could move on to the second slide. So this is in relation to the TOTSCo and the TOTSCo hub, and this is something I'm sure Richard will go over again in his slides later in the process. But TOTSCo, the company, we're a non-profit organisation formed by the industry with the task of implementing a hub messaging system to enact the one-touch switch process. The complete details of this is, as I say, I'll say this multiple times today, it can be found within the industry process document. Section 3 of the document goes into this in great detail. I'm just giving an overview really today. But the purpose of the hub will be to send messages between CPs for all aspects of the switching process. And these messages will contain the necessary information for each CP to match this to their records and to know which services are being discussed or requested. And we'll go into that more on the following slide, where we talk about the matching process, and that's possibly the sort of meatiest part of the industry process document. Each CP, upon being onboarded to the hub, will be assigned a unique identification number, which we're calling an RCPID. But this unique number will make it clear to users of the hub that messages are being sent from a particular entity and are received by a particular entity, and so both sides know the authenticity of the message is being sent from the correct entity by the identification number assigned to it. For a complete switch process to take place, there'll be a minimum of 6 messages that are sent back and forth in the hub. The initial switch match request and the response to this, and that's what we'll go over in greater detail in the next couple of slides. That's the initial message that will be sent after the customer has contacted the gaining provider, and the gaining provider sends a message to the losing provider to match within their records. The response to this would be from the losing provider to the gaining provider to indicate whether or not they've been able to successfully match this request, and if so, they would at this point provide the implications of switching to the customer. Following this, there would be a switch order and a switch response initially from the gaining provider to the losing provider, and then from the losing provider to the gaining provider. This is to confirm that the switch will go ahead, that the customer has confirmed the order, and we're proceeding. And then finally, a switch order trigger message going from the gainer to the loser to confirm the switch is impending, and then the losing provider sending a response to that, a confirmation to the gaining provider to confirm completion of the process. So that's the minimum number of messages that would need to be sent back and forth for any switch. but there's also the possibility of update messages being sent during the process, maybe to reflect a new proposed switch date if this changes during the customer's switch journey, and also a cancellation message depending on whether or not the customer may have changed their mind during the process. They may have cancelled their services separately. But the hub provides that ability to send messages for sort of every scenario that can occur within the switching process. So yeah, if we could move on to the following slide, which is in relation to the actual matching process. Now, as I say, this is possibly the sort of biggest and most important part of the industry process document, mostly contained within sections 5 and 6, and we really recommend going through the entire document for the full explanation here. I think I could possibly spend the rest of this call going over the matching process in every scenario and every possibility that can occur, but say for the interest of time, just to give you an overview, we will just focus on a very sort of high level description and summary of the process and how it works. So as we've already said, that the process would be initiated by the customer approaching the gaining provider and requesting to switch their services. It's important that the customer, the gaining provider doesn't initiate the switch kind of prematurely. They would need a strong indication from the customer that they are intending to switch services. So it's not something that would happen just as a result of a preliminary discussion with the customer. They need a kind of firm indication from the customer that they will switch. They would then send a message within the hub to the losing provider to request the switch, to the match of the customer information to switch. This information will contain customer information. This message will contain customer information such as the customer's surname, their address, and the current services that they have with their existing provider. And as just to reiterate here, the one-touch switch process applies only to phone and broadband residential services currently. There's certain information there, only surname. That's because some entities with historical records going back many years may have incomplete Christian name or forename records. So, for instance, for me, they might have Mr. T. Merritt rather than Thomas or Tom. So that's the sort of the minimum information provided within the message, and then optional information may also be included, such as the customer's phone number or their account number, and this will increase the chances of a successful match. But the reason it isn't mandatory information is because in the situation of a customer maybe phoning up their gaining provider or going into a gaining provider's shop, they might not have this information immediately to hand. So it's not mandatory information, but obviously the more information that is provided and the more complete that information is, the higher the possibility of a successful match. So yeah, we move on to the second slide for the matching process. The next slide, please. The next step would be the losing provider checking the information within the switch request against their customer records to confirm whether or not there has been a successful match. And as I will keep saying, the IP document contains every scenario here and every possibility of checking data and matching this against existing customer records. But the general sort of consensus point is that you would need 2 strong points of contact in order to form a successful match. So this would be necessary, maybe the surname and the address match, and that would be sufficient to generate a successful message going back to the gaining provider for the switch to proceed. So the next step in the process, the losing provider sends the message to the gaining provider through the hub to advise whether or not the match was successful. And if it was successful, this is the point at which the losing provider will send the implications of switching to the customer. If the match was unsuccessful, so maybe the address information wasn't conclusive and they couldn't verify that the switch request referred to the correct customer, the gaining provider may then want to follow up with the customer to clarify the details that the customer has provided. But this process would be similar to what would already be being performed and is something outside of the hub. But yeah, these conversations would take place. On the basis of the match being successful, the gaming provider will move forward with the switch process, and subsequent messages, which we covered on the previous slides, will be sent between the gaining and losing providers to confirm the switch order and then to trigger the actual switch on the date that has been agreed. So that's, I'd say, a very brief a summary of the industry process, of the purpose of the TOTSCo hub, of the matching process within the industry process document. I think we'll have some questions on it at the end of the call. But as I say, I really would reiterate the importance of reading this document. It does contain complete scenarios that I obviously don't have time to cover in this overview and introduction, so I would really recommend reading the document. It does contain, as I say, complete information regarding any switch scenario that we can think of. So yeah, thank you for your time. I'll hand back to Richard at this point. So thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you very much, Tom. That's a great overview. Okay, well, I'm going to move briefly over to a document that is currently on the TOTSCo website. It's called the developer document, or the one-touch switch. And this really, for people who may not be familiar with some terminology here. So there is a process that we need to use to be able to send a message to and from the gaining and the losing provider through our hub. And our hub is basically an automated platform that software developers can attach their services to and receive and send messages. And our hub will send those securely within a very short period of time. And having chosen your parties, your A and B partner, your loser and your gainer, they will then send a message to and from. The mechanics behind that is quite complicated, so we haven't got time to go into that now. But we are holding a clinic in the next few weeks about a fully API specification. So if you want to know a little bit more about the APIs, how they work and questions, you can certainly join that if we've got some space, Lou. So
we do.
This is all the developer documentation and the API hub is really to be read in conjunction with the industry process. The industry process tells us how we should implement the one-touch switch service. The hub itself is what we're going to do to implement it. So at the moment, we have currently going through a procurement exercise to choose a vendor to be able to develop the software that's going to sit to make the hub work. At the moment, we're going through that. We've been doing that since I started and way before that, and currently going through some workshops with the vendors to choose them and to put that into place. The API, application program interface, if you don't know what an API is, and it really is a set of instructions, a set of messages, a standardization that software developers, BAs, program QA leads can certainly look into that document and go, okay, what do we have to construct a message and how do we construct it and what do we have to put in that message to be able to communicate with the other party? The hub itself is pretty dumb. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't validate the message. It doesn't read the message. It certainly doesn't read the message. And then we make that very clear because we are only allowing the hub to know where to send the message to and from. Within the message body, the body of the hub, i.e. think about as an email, we don't read it and we will never read it. We want to make that very clear. And why is this important, the API? Because it gives you a standardization. It allows all the development teams around the industry to use one process to send a message to and from. So when I receive a message from my other party sending a message to me, I know what the format of that message is. I know as a software developer what I can do with that message, and I will attach that to my other processes in the back office. It might be a sales process engine, it might be a switching engine, it might be an OSS BSS, which basically a piece of software that I bought online that a supplier can then say, okay, I understand that message and I will help you with your switching process or your customer relationship or your matching records, i.e. your customers. I'm not going to go too much in depth with this because it's quite complicated, and really I'm trying to give an overview like Tom has. So who would use it? Well, software developers would use the API to actually write their code. A BA would actually look at that, rather like Tom, to actually understand what they've got to do if we have a BA within the business. Some companies don't have BAs, they just have their software development teams. And do you have to use the API? No, you don't have to use the API. If you have a software team or you are looking at a back-end process, absolutely, by all means use it but there are software out there that you can purchase and you can do a deal with called an OSS BSS, which is basically a piece of software that will help you with your full journey. And we are looking to find a company and talking to companies about a small retailer portal. And what that is basically a website that you can sign up to, and it will help you process those messages. So when you get a message from the gaming provider, let's just say that was Talk as an example, that message will come into the small retailer portal, but you'll get a notification and say, look, there's a message waiting for you. And through a wizard, a form, you can then easily reply to that message. So really, that's what we're calling the small retail portal. That hasn't been designed yet, and we're looking for companies at the moment who potentially could help us with that. So if you've got any questions around that, in that kind of guise, please put that in the chat and we'll certainly go through that. So let's move on to the next part. So at the moment, this is fully draft. So this is at the moment in play. But for people who have read the previous version of the documentation, the One Touch Switch Developers Guide, we are looking to update that, and it isn't major changes. We're going through a review process at the moment, but we are just making it more consistent and easier to follow. And we're looking to reformat some of the examples, what we call JSON. We're looking at typos and updating diagrams. We're going to prefix some messages within the API specification to make it easier to group them together from residential. There is some thoughts of how we could then split out through some of the match elements and the order elements. So if you understand the documentation, you can read that. There's consistency between request, confirmation, and failure message types, and we're adding more response codes. So the response codes will be in a separate spreadsheet, and those are the messages that you get within the body of the information, and you can respond to those. So look out for the website for that documentation to be updated. It's just going through some processes at the moment to get it all signed off, but they aren't major changes. I just want to be clear on that. So let's move on to Andrew. Andrew, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Great.
Okay, so I just want to, for those that don't know me, introduce myself as one of the directors of TOTSCo. When TOTSCo was set up, there was a lot of obviously discussion within industry as to how to make it representative and make sure that no individual, organisation, party or constituency could dominate that or move things to its own advantage. And what came up was to appoint 6 directors who have a responsibility and knowledge of various sectors of the industry. So those 6 directors, there are 2 that represent the large CPs, currently occupied by a representative from BT and Sky. 1 from medium retail CPs, which is currently Vodafone. 1 from business focused, 1 from new infrastructure, and 1 from small retail CPs. And that's the role that I represent, having been on the steering groups as a sort of representative from ISPA and some of the trade bodies. So my role is primarily as a director of TOTSCo, and therefore I have responsibility to TOTSCo for what it does. But my channel and background is obviously to interact with, hear from, and bring the knowledge and opinion and concerns of those small retail CPs, i.e. all the people who are probably on this call. And obviously part of doing that is working very much with the trade associations who have the reach into that dynamic. One of the things that we're finding very hard is actually to identify and locate who all of those people are. Not many of them necessarily belong to the trade bodies. They've never had to register anywhere with Ofcom or etc. And therefore, finding out who they are is one of the big challenges that TOTSCo faces, and making sure that obviously everyone is kept informed, and hence part of these clinics and workshops that we're doing, which is trying to get the message out to make sure that we talk to and everybody is aware of what's going on. The message, if you ever talk to anybody, is unless you are solely business, these regulations apply to you. They apply to absolutely everybody. And it's very much a big bang approach where we have to have everybody ready at the same time in order to perform. Otherwise, as you can imagine, with a two-way messaging system, if one party doesn't exist, there is a problem. So my main sort of comment is get in touch with me if you've got concerns. Use the trade associations. They can be a very good filtering mechanism to sort of group people together and provide additional services. But I am here to talk to people and obviously voice concerns, etc. For example, we made sure that if you want to be a member of TOTSCo, that's only a £50 registration fee. Membership allows you to vote for people like me, so you can have a say as to who your representative should be. But we've deliberately priced that as low as possible, so it shouldn't be a barrier to membership within TOTSCo. So I put at the bottom there, the key three things is register if you're not already registered with TOTSCo. That means we can more easily keep in touch with you and know what your issues are and involve you in newsletters and stakeholder forums. Act, and this is very much what Richard and so on have been saying, there are things that you can do now and you need to be doing now. That ranges from just understanding what the situation is, understanding what your own processes are and how you want to interact. The development of the hub, while that is a few months away, there are things that you can and should be doing now. Primarily making sure that your all your address data, your customer information is up to date, that you've got a full set of data, that you know the UPRN detail for the address. All of these things are things that you can actually do now and make sure your systems are up to scratch. And remember, of course, that you will almost certainly be both a gaining provider and a losing provider. This is almost a neutral situation for everybody that finds themselves, that over time, you will be both. And therefore, the system has to work because you are on both sides of the equation. And the bigger demand is on being a losing provider because you've got to do the matching, you've got to respond, etc. But as a gaining provider, there are things you need to do with your processes of making sure you ask the right questions of the customer, they know what's going on, and you know how to obviously interact to provision services. So that's pretty much me. That's all I want to say. And the final bit was talk. So do get in touch. And be delighted to sort of obviously say more or involve people as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That's fantastic. Okay, let's move on to another Andrew.
Hi there. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. I apologies. I had this in my diary for 10:30, so I've joined actually at an opportune time. So that was
Great time.
That's well good foresight for me. I did catch most of what Andrew G said, and really just sort of reiterating that Andrew's kind of our representative for the constituency, the small CP constituency. He's also a long-standing as the board member as well, and represents us and keeps us up to date through our own member engagement and conversations. I mean, just very briefly on this, but I'm sure most people know who we are, but we're kind of the association, and there are many associations in this sector. We're the ones that represent the breadth of the industry, so both sort of from the largest well-established household names through to some of the newer market entrants and more specialist niche providers, and everything in between, from consumer to business and other services as well. I think for us, we're just sort of working through within that broad membership who falls into this constituency. The way they're drawn, people can fall into other ones quite easily. So we will be looking to represent that sort of constituency, which with its own specific needs and concerns through this group and through our own engagement with members. But we also have a broad interest in the One Touch Switch sort of being a success across the piece as well for all of our members. So yeah, keen just to listening today. Really, I think it would be useful for me is to maybe organise a specific ISPA session with relevant colleagues on the more practical side of things as we get really through into the detail and the process of making this work, with obviously timing moving quite fast. So I won't say anything else at the minute. I think Andrew's probably covered everything that I would have said anyway, and that's me and that's ISPA.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So we go to David.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing us to join in. UK WISPA, just a little bit of background, UK Wireless Internet Service Providers Association. We set that up in 2016. We have 104 operators and 33 partners, technology vendors, partners, and so forth. And Ofcom is also a member of UK WISPA. Most of our operators are very, very small, as you can see there. Many serve just a small village. Many of them are micro, as we call them, and community providers, and some are community interest companies as well. If you have the next slide, we did some analysis about what kind of back office systems people have. And one of the issues that our members face is many of our members, more than half, don't have the kind of OSS systems that a larger CP would have. And indeed, some, for some, the cost of an OSS might be more than their annual turnover. So, these are, in some cases, voluntary people, not full-on businesses, but they're still regulated in the same way, serving, a few hundred customers in, I don't know, Scotland or whatever. So it does represent some quite big challenge. Increasing their capital cost or operating cost would be quite damaging. And a number of our members that we surveyed in December have expressed extreme concern about this, to the extent that, they may well need to shut down as a result of the introduction of these, which we believe is going to have quite a harmful effect on consumers that they service, because the ones that are the most vulnerable are the ones that have no alternative whatsoever. So we're talking about, less than 2 megabit connectivity. In total, there's about 100,000 customers serviced by our members. I'm not saying that 100,000 people will be switched off on the 4th of April, but it's quite possible that a few thousand will, and the cost to the, to BDUK or whatever to try and plug that, and the time taken is going to be horrendous. So we think that that's a bit of an oversight by Ofcom, who are trying to introduce this for consumer protection, and could easily result in quite a large number of consumers being actually disconnected. Final slide. Oh, that was it. Oh yeah, some recommendations there. So what we're suggesting is that perhaps the SLA that's being proposed of 60-second response could be softened for smaller businesses, in order to give them an opportunity to respond without necessarily having to introduce the cost of a formalised or automated system. The exemption for small and micro is really an Ofcom matter, not a TOTSCo matter. But that's something that we're lobbying for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That's fantastic. Let's move on to Mike. Are you there, Mike?
Yep, I certainly am. Good morning.
Brilliant.
I've got a small number of slides here. I'm going to rattle through the first ones, but as I do to all of our meetings on this matter for our members in Inca, let's just remind ourselves there are 53 working days to go. So I'm sure everybody is champing at the bit actually to start doing this. And I just saw a squadron of pigs fly by. Next slide, please. Oh, who's driving the slides? Is that me? Or, oh, thank you. Okay. So who's Inca? Well, we are the Independent Networks Cooperative Association. We set up to do the normal trade industry body things in the digital infrastructure sector. We represent our members to the sectors of government, Ofcom and other bodies, work on standards and try and get people up to speed with things that are going on in the industry. Who are our members? Basically altnets. New infrastructure providers is the constituency within TOTSCo. We also have operators who are both retail and access CPs, so vertically integrated. We have wholesale networks only, we have retail operators, suppliers and vendors from the civil engineering people who actually dig the holes in the ground to bring the fibre in, software solutions, mapping, third-party integrators, local authorities, investors, and leavened by what we term internally a bunch of evil consultants. Next slide, please. Very quickly, at the moment, the alternative network infrastructure is passing about 11.6 million homes with 1.4 million connected and 18 billion of private investment committed to the industry. That was the figures as of last year. We're just about to rerun this survey for this year. So there's as much money going into alternative networks, in fact, more than the incumbent. Next, please. So we have at the moment, end of 22, about 220 members. That continues to grow. Next slide, please. All right, I'm rattling through these because I want to get to the bit about OTS. These are the projects that we've been working on since about 2010, supporting superfast broadband, getting BDUK funding. We did a report called Building Gigabit Britain, which had many of its things adopted as government policy, so aiming for full fibre and Gigabit Britain. And now all we see is that the network build continues to accelerate, which is great for all of us. Next slide, please. We have a number of overarching projects that we work on, Net Carbon Zero being a relatively new one. But the most important thing for us here is switching and wholesale. That's been my brief since about 2018. And we've worked with the OTA in the various steering groups and design groups on this matter. Next slide, please. Okay, so in specific, what have we been doing on OTS and GPL? And has been alluded to in the chat, I think it's probably wise that we should remind ourselves that OTS is just a subset. It's very important, it's a key subset. But everybody, really, domestic or residential or business, are covered by the new general condition, section 7, which mandates gaining provider-led switching. Now, this has been on the card since 2018. So understand why Ofcom and others are a bit surprised that industry hasn't actually done too much about it until the very, very last minute, because it's been consulted on, BDUK DCMS consultation, Ofcom have put out statements on it, and it's been we're now in its sort of 5th year of being told to do this. So we liaise with Ofcom about it, both at the policy and regulatory level, more specifically with the working groups that put together an OTA to come up with the process design spec. In fact, my first meeting with the OTA working group was before anybody knew about the pandemic. That's how long the detailed design has been going on for. We keep our members updated. We have a regular switching and wholesale special interest group that meets once a month online. And we also liaise with TOTSCo, both directly with Richard and his team, and also with the director for the new infrastructure operators, which is Gita Sorensen, who we do a lot of work with. We also liaise with the other industry bodies. And most important thing is we've actually drawn up a GPL and OTS action plan for operators, which is available on our website. And it breaks down step by step the things that you should be doing or should have been doing by now in order to identify the needs the needs of your business to attack this and to get GPL and OTS into action as quickly as possible. I think the very last thing that I will say, next slide, please. This is the last slide. Just to say that we have substantial OTS resources on our website for members. In addition to the special interest group, we run various webinars, member briefings. As soon as the procurement is done, for example, by TOTSCo, we will have a deep dive webinar into the solution and the supplier actually provided to help bring members up to speed with what they need to do. I should point out that we actually have members within Inca who have OTS compliant switching platforms right now, because we've had a number of initiatives going on in this space, and we have OSS, BSS and systems design vendors who are all over this like a rash and can implement stuff extremely quickly. So our sort of message to TOTSCo and to anybody else that's interested is that we will probably find that our members are much more ready on OTS than, say, the big incumbents who have got a lot more work to do. And we are also happy to take on new CPs just to assist them with their integration into a switching platform that one of our members has. So there are solutions out there, and solutions that can be put into place pretty quickly. And the last thing I would mention to CPs who have not perhaps heard of AltNets too much, actually we can add coverage and reach to your retail offer, because broadly speaking, although there are a lot of city-based regional ones now, but typically an Inca member would have been making a business case out there in the wilds where the incumbent didn't want to go. So you'll find us all over the place, and we can help you get more customers as well as help you through the OTS. So that's it, Richard. That's from me.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate everybody who's come on and made some comments and some advice. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be holding another one of these sessions next week. And also, as I said, sending out the recording that's going to be edited, hopefully. So what we'll do now is we'll open up the floor to some questions and answers. Maybe I'll read through the chat. And just to say that if you do want to ask a question on camera,